So you have a real estate investment property in Cambridge or Somerville or Medford, Massachusetts. But every year you look at the numbers and the rents seem to barely budge. The property value doesn't seem to be going up much. You're getting calls all the time from renters with maintenance requests, high heating bills, ongoing issues. You're looking at your numbers, they don't look great. Well, do I have news for you? This is something I get calls all the time on. Landlords are not doing great. And honestly, a lot of times they don't even get the calls. I just observe and see these properties, maybe not in the greatest part of town. They're struggling to get quality tenants. There's a lot of deferred maintenance. And it just looks like a property when I look at it and I say, the returns just aren't going to be there in the long run. Like, you're going to get small returns, but there's such better opportunities out there. In today's video, I'm going to share with you guys why I believe the 1031 exchange is one of the most underrated and probably the most underrated tool in the investor's toolbox, particularly in Cambridge and Somerville, Massachusetts. Hey guys, if you don't know me, my name is Jankowitz. I am a real estate broker focused primarily on Cambridge and Somerville, Massachusetts. I've closed over 500 transactions in the last 6 years. Before I get into it, please make sure you watch till the end of the video. At the end, I will be dropping a totally free ebook. If you'd like a copy of it, there'll be instructions at the end of the video, and it goes into a lot more details about specifically how 1031s are structured. And then secondarily, the most important thing you must know about 1031 exchanges, this is a tax thing. I am not a CPA. I know a lot about 1031s. I feel pretty confident about them, but do not take this as tax advice. Make sure you talk to a CPA. Make sure that you understand your tax picture before you ever sell a property and think about doing a 1031 exchange completely. All right, let's get into the video. So who is this video for, first of all? This video is one of these videos where it's not for everyone who's watching. So for some people, you may have to tune out here. But who is this video for? This is for someone who's owned a property, I would say for at least 5 years. This is not for someone who just purchased an investment property, okay? It needs to be an investment. You've owned it for at least 5 years and you're having some issues. Primarily, your rents aren't really increasing that much. You're getting a lot of calls from tenants with a lot of issues with the property, and/or you may have a lot of deferred maintenance, things like a leaky roof or an older roof, older windows that are costing your tenants a lot in heating bills, potentially water damage, just a lot of ongoing issues, heating systems that are older, things like this. So if you're someone that falls in any of those buckets, you're having ongoing issues with your property, maybe it's always vacant, seems like a lot of turnover and a lot of wear and tear every year trying to get things back up and running, a lot of missed months of rent, this is the video for you. What I find so interesting is I know hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of landlords and investors in Cambridge and Somerville. And what's so fascinating is I see these properties every single week. Seriously, every single week I see these kind of videos that have all kinds of issues. They have funky layouts, condition issues, they're in not a great part of town, whatever it may be. But what I find interesting is that most owners I know do nothing about it. Year after year, they struggle, they complain, they want things to be better, but nothing changes. And maybe that's because a lot of landlords do not realize there is an option on the table that frankly they should really be doing, and that's called a 1031 exchange. So my first piece of advice is you need to start thinking like an investor. And what that means is you need to start thinking about rebalancing. In other words, if you have a poorly performing asset, you don't just hold on to it and let it kind of slowly do okay and die and do whatever year after year after year. You need to identify the situation and you need to improve the situation. And that's what a 1031 exchange precisely allows you to do. A 1031 exchange will allow you to take that property, or maybe you have multiple poor performing properties, sell that property, and then put it into new real estate that will be ideally better performing. And so if you have properties that have not great locations, poor layouts, poor conditions, poor condition, you have a lot of headaches, the goal is to go from that scenario to a much better one. What a 1031 allows you to do is to sell your property or properties and put it into a new property without paying capital gains or depreciation recapture. So essentially, there's limited costs. Yes, you have realtor fees. Yes, that's not nothing. It's generally 2.5% to 5% is kind of generally the rough zone you'd be looking at. But beyond that, you have attorney fees, you have stamp tax fees, and that's it. And so when you have a property that has quite a bit of capital gain that's happened, it's a great opportunity to rebalance and get into a position in a property that's going to provide much better gains over the long run, provide much better rental income over the long run, and provide much less headaches in the form of higher quality tenants, less turnover, and ideally a property that's in better condition. So now I'm going to share 2 examples of properties that went through 1031 exchange with me last year. And I'm going to share the existing state when we started and where they are today. So the first one, it's a property, it's a small condo in Watertown. It was in a C, B- part of Watertown. It was in a C, B- building in the 70s. The unit itself was so-so. What I observed was the rental growth was not great year over year over year. The property, I believe, was totally paid off, but they weren't seeing rental growth. The property value wasn't really increasing. These owners had a couple children. They didn't live that close to the property, and it was frankly just a pain in the butt to deal with, and they weren't seeing the returns. So what did we do? We were able to sell this property. I should also mention that it was in a building that was older, so it was starting to have issues with assessments every couple of years, which is normal in these buildings. But we were able to sell this property. We marketed it. We positioned it to make it look as good as possible to get the highest possible amount. Then we sold it, and we were able to 1031 exchange it into a new condo, but instead of the Watertown market, we moved it to the Cambridge market. And it was a good part of Cambridge. We went from like a C plus, B minus area to an A area in Cambridge. We went from a building in the 70s to a building built in, 2018 or so. We went from a building with outdoor parking to a garage parking. The unit that they have now has central AC. The old one had a window unit. This newer building has quartz countertops and new appliances. It already had a tenant in place that was paying excellent rent. So they went from a much nicer product with higher rent, with higher appreciation prospects in the long run, with higher rent increases in the long run, with less tenant headaches, and they're in the Cambridge market where property taxes ended up being about 50%. So even though they're purchasing a property that was almost double in value, the property taxes will remain about the same or maybe even a little bit lower. So that is an example of a no-brainer 1031 exchange. And there are so many opportunities for these, but unfortunately a lot of landlords just don't realize that the grass could be a lot greener on the other side. Now I'm going to give you another example, and this was kind of a crazy story. This guy bought a two-family in a not great part of Medford, what I would consider a C area of Medford, about 5 years ago. He did get a great price when he bought it. He paid very little. I think it was about $700,000 for the property, but it was just ongoing headaches. Every year we would try and rent the property. Every year it would take many months. Every year it was extremely hard to find anyone who was a somewhat decent tenant to take this place. The unit was in poor condition, was not well maintained, and ultimately what happened, I don't want to get too in the weeds, but the upstairs unit got totally trashed and destroyed. The owner had to hire an attorney. They lost about 8 months of rent. And then on top of that, they had to put about $100K into the upstairs unit. And with my help, we totally renovated the upstairs unit completely. And so now at this point, they're in the property for about $800,000. And what do? They work with me. We put it on the market. We're able to sell it. I think he ended up walking away with something like a $450,000 gain or something like that, despite all the headaches and mess that he got into. We were able to take this property from a C area, not great part of town, where the unit would sit, and he ended up paying a lot every year in just turnover, wear and tear, and attorney fees and issues. And we moved it into Somerville, a walking distance to a T-stop, from a two-family into a three-family, and the three-family was totally renovated. And they all had laundry unit and great kitchens and great bathrooms. They all had leases in place for the next year. And so he essentially doubled his rental income. He went from a property that was in a not great part of town to an excellent part of town with excellent prospects in the long run in terms of rent growth and property growth. He went from challenging tenants to excellent tenants, and he's getting a lot of his time back. This guy has multiple kids. He lives about an hour away. It's just a total no-brainer. So what are the takeaways here? The takeaways here are really, if you're in a situation where you have a property with a lot of headaches, where you feel like you're not getting the rental income that you think is possible, where you feel like you're paying too much for maintenance and upkeep, where you feel like you're having ongoing capital expenditures for things like roofs or special assessments if you own a condo, or heating systems or windows, if you just feel like year after year, it's like rolling a rock up a hill and it just comes down and falls on top of you, there's a high probability that you should consider a 1031 exchange to get in a better shape, to get into, frankly, a better opportunity with a lot more upside. And I think that if you do this right, you could potentially be 1031 exchanging every 5 to 10 years, and you can continue to upgrade to better and better units. And then by the time you're in old age, you could be in a situation where you own a really large building in a really great part of town with excellent income with a lot of convenience. So what are my final thoughts here? First of all, if you're in this position, don't be afraid. 1031 sounds scary. It sounds like it's easy to mess up. I can assure you, if done right, it can be a stress-free process and you can end up in a much better place. And if you're considering a 1031 exchange, take a look at the description. My phone number and email address are there. I'm happy to talk through the dynamics of a 1031. I'm happy to look at your property and let you know, honestly, if it makes sense or not. Sometimes properties are just great properties and you should do nothing with them. That's just the truth. So it really just depends. And then finally, in closing, as promised, I do have an ebook. All you have to do to get this new free ebook is subscribe to my newsletter. There's a link below in the description. Sign up for my newsletter and I'll personally email you a free copy of the ins and outs of a 1031 exchange, how it all works, and how to put the whole thing together. And of course, you'll also subscribe to my newsletter and you'll get free monthly updates on what's happening in the Cambridge and Somerville market, rental data, multifamily sales data, condo sales data, my take on where things are going, changes with the new Cambridge zoning law, and a lot more. So subscribe to my YouTube channel, subscribe to my newsletter. If you guys have questions, email, call me, or drop a comment in the comment box below. And I'll see you guys next time.
you.